All right, everybody, welcome. This video is for lesson 11.4C for Expo. We're going to continue working on adding and subtracting fractions, especially when the denominators are different. So that's going to be our objective for today. Before we get into it, we can look at some review problems just from earlier things from throughout the chapter. So the first one, okay, is a dividing problem. Okay, when we look at that dividing, now we don't need the denominators to match. What we're looking for is, can we flip the second fraction? Can we take the reciprocal of it and rewrite it as multiplication? So when we look at that, okay, we're going to leave the first fraction alone, turn the divide into a times, and then flip that second fraction. The reciprocal of the second fraction is just reversing the numerator and the denominator. Then we can take a step of factoring. We can try to factor what we can before we can cancel. So the upper left cannot factor at all, so that's going to stay as an m squared. The lower left, we're going to take out an m. Okay, take out an m and divide them both by m. We get m times m minus 7 times. The bottom right is just a 1. That can't factor. And then the upper right is our 2 parenthesis factoring. We need to use a plus and a minus to make negative 21. And we want to look at two numbers that multiply to negative 21. That they multiply to negative 21 and they add to negative 4. And that would be 3 times negative 7. So if we use a positive 3, what's happening here? Sorry about that. Positive 3 and a negative 7. Okay, those two numbers, it would be the factored version of m squared minus 4m minus 21. Okay, now we can cross out the matches. So that would be m minus 7s. And we can take this m and we can make this m squared an m to the 1. Okay, we can subtract those exponents. So up top, we still have an m and an m plus 3. On the bottom, we didn't have anything left. So we can write it like that, or we can write it just as the numerator. When the whole denominator goes away, you don't have to write it as a fraction anymore. Okay, the second one is subtraction. So when we're subtracting, now we need the denominators to match, and we do have that this time. So we can go straight into combining like terms, but the 2x and the 8 are not like terms, the negative 8. They're not like terms, so I can't put those together and make like a negative 6. I can just put them next to each other and combine them into one fraction. Then we can look at factoring. Okay, can we factor and cancel a little bit? We can take a 2 as a GCF out of the top. The bottom we can factor as an x plus 5 and an x minus 4. Those two numbers multiply to negative 20 and they add to negative 1. Then we're able to get to our answer. We can cross off the things that match. And 2 over x plus 5 is our answer. Okay, then we got into adding and subtracting when the denominators were different. Okay, and for those we need a lowest common denominator. So we would be in search of an LCD for these ones. Okay, and to get that, we would just look at the bottoms and say, okay, this is like a 2x and a 1x. We need those to match. The smallest common denominator between 1 and 2 is 2. Okay, that's the smallest multiple of both of them. And then we have to make sure that they have the same variable to the same exponent. So they're both an x to the 1 already. So I'm not going to have to change the amount of x's in either fraction. So all that needs to happen, the first fraction already has that LCD, so I'm not going to change it. The second fraction needs to get multiplied by 2, top and bottom. And that would turn the bottom fraction into, or the right-hand denominator into a 2x, and then we have 3 times 2, so 6 up top. Okay, then for this one, we can look at 4x and 6. Again, they're not like terms, so I can't add those together to be 10x. So 4x plus 6 over 2x. And then we can look to factor a little bit. We can pull a 2 out of each of those. Oops, but I messed that up. So when you take that 2, we're dividing both terms by 2. We get 2x plus 3. Okay, and then on the bottom we have a 2x. Since we were able to factor that a little bit, we can cancel out these 2's. And we have 2x plus 3 on top, x on the bottom as our answer. Okay, one more time, looking at an LCD first. Okay, we have d squared and d to the 3. So neither of them have any coefficients this time. So we won't have to multiply by any numbers. But this, the lowest common denominator for this one would just be making sure that the amount of variables is the same. The exponent, the amount of d's is the same. So d to the 3 would be the lowest common denominator. And I can achieve that just by multiplying both of these by d. So the first fraction, 4d over d to the 3rd. Okay, the second fraction, I'm going to change something right away. So right now, this is a minus. We're subtracting a group of things. Okay, what we want to do instead is add the opposites. So when we're subtracting a binomial or a trinomial or a whole group, we can add the opposites. So we can turn it to a plus sign by distributing that minus sign in. And then it looks like this, negative 3 minus 2d. Okay, and then that's over d to the 3rd. So I did 2 steps at once. I got the LCD, I got all the fractions to have the same denominator, and I changed the plus sign into a minus sign by distributing. Okay, then we can find the like terms, 4d and negative 2d. Okay, those two will add to positive 2d. Okay, then the rest of it, okay, we have a negative 3 up top and a d to the 3 on the bottom. The rest of it can't really combine. Remember, you don't change the bottoms when you add or subtract. And this is our final answer. We don't have a common factor to try to do a GCF of the top, so there's no way I can factor or reduce in this one. Okay, so that's all review. So looking forward at what we need to be able to do today is still continue to discuss how it works when the LCD gets a little bit more complicated. So if it's a little bit more complicated on the bottom. So sometimes, okay, you get something like this where it has a monomial times a binomial. Okay, and we have to talk about what the GCF of that would be. Okay, so the LCD is the denominators multiplied together. That's how it's going to work today. Okay, so if you have a monomial and a binomial, it's not like trying to figure out how to make it be a plus 3 or anything like that. The lowest common denominator for this problem is simply x times x plus 3. We just need to make each fraction get multiplied by the other denominator. That's really how it's going to work. Excuse me. So what we need to do is we need to take this first fraction. It has an x on the bottom, but it doesn't have an x plus 3 yet. So I need to multiply the top and the bottom by x plus 3. This fraction over here has an x plus 3 already, but it doesn't have an x yet. So it's going to get multiplied by x over x. So, and then with this one, you just have to be a little bit more careful with distribute. So I need to distribute this 2 in. So the top would look like 2x plus 6. Okay, and then on the bottom, we have an x and an x plus 3. It's going to be ugly, but that's going to be the way we would have to look through it. 5 times x is just 5x. On the bottom, we have x and x plus 3. Okay, I'm not supposed to distribute down there. I'm not supposed to do anything. I'm just taking the two denominators and smushing them together. Okay, then we look for common denominators. That would be common like terms. That would be the 2x and the 5x. We can add those together to get 7x. And then the rest of it is just going to be our answer. We have a positive 6. And then on the bottom, we have an x and an x plus 3. There's no GCF of the top, which makes this our answer. So you don't get a lot of reducing. You don't get a lot of canceling. And there's not a lot to factor. So the answers kind of start off ugly and kind of stay that way. This one, same exact idea. Okay, the least common or lowest common denominator, okay, is just the two denominators smushed together. Okay, when it's a monomial and a binomial, just take those two and smush them next to each other. So the first fraction is getting multiplied by x plus 1s. The second fraction is getting multiplied by x's. So again, we have to make sure that we distribute in that first fraction. So that would be 3x plus 3 over x times x plus 1. Doesn't matter what order you write the denominators in. Minus, we have 2x and we have x times x plus 1. Okay, now the denominators match, so then I can add across the top. My like terms are 3x and negative 2x, and those are going to give me just a 1x, and then the rest of it just gets copied down. I have a positive 3 that didn't combine with anything, and I have an x and an x plus 1 on the bottom. All right, so that's really how it's going to work. I have one more like that, and then I have one more like yesterday, just mixed in. So looking at this one, same exact idea. Lowest common denominator is going to have to be x times x plus 2. So I'm going to have to multiply this fraction by an x plus 2. I have to multiply this fraction by an x. Okay, and then we can see what comes out from that. So this one, we get 5x plus 10. And then we have a over x times x plus 2 on the bottom. Plus sign, we have 4x squared here, 4x times x. All right, and then from there, okay, we don't have any like terms. I am just going to go ahead and write it in standard form. So looking at trying to factor, if we can, we have 4x squared plus 5x plus 10. And then we have x and x plus 2 on the bottom. So what we would look for there is, can we factor that? But we can't. There's no way to factor this. This is the top is not factorable. So this would just be our final answer. There's no GCF. I can't. There's nothing that multiplies to 10 and adds to 5 while also multiplying to 4x squared out front. So that one is all done. Okay, then last one. Just recognize this is two monomials again. Two monomial denominators. Okay, this one is not like the ones we were just saying. So we don't necessarily just have to multiply them together. Okay, the lowest common denominator is just what's the smallest multiple of 4 and 6, and that would be 12, and then making sure they both have 1x at the end. So this one just has to get multiplied by 3 over 3. So we get 21 over 12x. This one has to get multiplied by 2 to be 12, but also by an x, top and bottom. Then the tops are not like terms, so I'm just going to flip the order to write it in standard form. There's no GCF, so there's nothing to factor, so there's nothing to cancel. So that's the video for 11.4 part C. I believe it's a delta math for the assignment. Thanks for watching.